Welcome to the Journos. I'm Peter Martin. Hugh MacDonald and Alison McConnell are here with me on the show on our YouTube channel and, of course, on our podcast as well. And thank you so much to so many of you for downloading the podcast and listening regularly every week. Over and above that, the good news is if you are subscribing to PLZ Soccer, there's an opportunity for you to subscribe to PLZ Premium. And if you hit the subscribe button there, you'll get some fantastic one-to-ones. We've got a brilliant interview with Rico Quitongo talking about racism, but we've got the Everton boss David Moyes this week, and we also have, interestingly, former SNP MP Ian Blackford, who's a big Hibs fan, who will feature on our premium service for you to look over, as well as other good one-to-ones on the way. Exclusive prizes and giveaways, it's all there on Premium. And if you hit the subscribe button on Premium, you're in the draw for a chance to go to the Champions League final in 2026 with your friend, flights and accommodation and the tickets to the game. Can't be bad. All you have to do is subscribe. And also, really good news is we have an official charity partner, and that's Maggie's, who are, of course, the specialists in cancer care support. And if you want to find out a little bit more about it, www.maggies.org. And they have a superb team that offers support to you or your family or your friends, anyone affected by cancer. So, with that in mind, lots to talk about, lots happening as ever in Scottish football. I did draw your attention, guys, to Rico Quitongo. It was an interesting interview with a 26-year-old who's got a famous father in Jose, who played for Hearts and many, many other clubs. Really skillful player. But Rico and Jai have played their football in the lower leagues in Scotland. Rico suffered from an incident which took him on a spiral downwards, where he was questioning his love of football, suffered racist abuse, didn't get the support that he thought he was going to get from his club, and then from there is forced to tell the story of how he has to take them all the way to court and an appeal. And with that in mind, he did mention something that he said, you know, racism is in Scottish football. And there needs to be more done about it, and it starts in your home.
Absolutely. I mean, like all issues around racism, sectarianism, or whatever, it's education's going to solve it. That's the only way it's going to solve it, and it's got to be solved in the home by people as well. I found it very sad because if you're not a victim of something, you can not turn a blind eye to it, but you can fail to realise how big the problem is in Scottish football. So when somebody's coming out and saying, listen, there is a huge problem in this, you know, it then turns your attention to what maybe you've heard or seen in Scottish football grounds and looked at it as a real blight, not in the game, but a blight in society. It's so easy just to sit and condemn it and not do anything about it. I think it needs action. I think there's good charities working on action. I think there's good programmes in the schools to deal with it. But it must be addressed, because it's not only poisonous to the people who are receiving it, it's poisonous for the people that are doing it.
Yeah, I've been an ambassador for Show Racism, the Red Card, for many years, Alison, and again, you have a situation where grassroots is the first thing. You have to address it, and sometimes maybe kids have to educate their parents on the error of their ways. But this country suffers from racism, it suffers from sectarianism, and the way society is going at the moment, there are many other prejudices which are coming into play. And again, without getting overly political about it, some people feel as if they are legitimately okay to have a go at people, ethnic minorities, religious beliefs, and the colour of their skin.
Yeah, it's very difficult just now. I think the political climate has changed quite a bit in the last couple of years. I think the rise of the right, not just in Britain but across Europe, I think has maybe emboldened some attitudes that maybe didn't appear to be quite so prevalent not that long ago. When you say didn't appear to be, I think it's maybe always under the surface, but there seems to be a legitimacy to voicing certain opinions now. You see it drive through the city, drive around certain areas at Glasgow just now, and all you can see are flags tied to lampposts. What does that represent, and what does it say, and what are the undercurrents of those messages? But the thing that struck me about the interview was how lonely it must feel when you feel as though you have to fight like that, and you have to use every legal channel available to you, and you don't just go to court, but you have to go back. You have to go through an appeal. All these things now, when you look back and you discuss it in the rear view mirror and you tell the story in the sequence of the story, you're missing out the sheer stress involved in what that takes, because it's a long road. It's full of bureaucracy, red tape, it's isolating. You're having to then go back again while still playing football, trying to earn a wage. I think he became a father within that whole process. So massive life changes while this is going on. And yeah, I think it takes extraordinary strength to actually stand up and say, I'm not going to bury my head in the sand. I'm going to shout about what this problem is. And it takes a lot of courage when people around you and employers around you are essentially saying, no, this problem doesn't exist. You're being gaslit almost to say, it didn't happen. We have no evidence of this happening.
Yeah, and sometimes taking it to the extreme. I mean, it's only, 30 years this week, Hugh, that young Mark Scott lost his life, and Nil by Mouth, was mobilised to highlight, the tragedy of the young man losing his life, going through an area, and again, people are offended by colours, people are offended by football strips, the madness of this country at sometimes leaves you exasperated, but the loss of a life sometimes can force people to rethink, the stupidity of some of the prejudices that they have.
Yeah, I thought at the time, the victim's father made an incredible statement at the time. He said, there's two tragedies here. It's the tragedy of my son, who's been murdered needlessly, and there's the tragedy of the perpetrator, who has been inculcated with such hatred that he's felt the need, the impetus to do this. He said, we shouldn't forget that. That's two lives, one life ended and another life poisoned. And that really hit me at the time. It really hit me that a guy could have such wisdom and in such a moment of utter tragedy. And it's true. I mean, as I go back to the education, I always think that we, me, myself, I always try to distance myself from it. So that's not me or that's not that. But you've got to look at yourself. I mean, you're talking about 30 years ago. 30 years ago, I had a conversation with my daughter, and she was only 11 or 12 at the time, and said to me, you can't use that language. And I thought I was using, language for Chinese restaurants or Asian corner shops. And she says, that's out. And I had to sit and think, of course, she's right. 30 years ago, I was using that kind of language, and I had to be educated that language was wrong.
Yeah.
There also has to be a level of humility, though. If someone says to you, what you're saying is wrong, that your immediate response is not to be defensive and say, I don't mean anything by it, and no, that's not me. It takes quite a certain type of person to say, hang on a minute, right, okay, I'm going to reflect and I'm actually going to change how I speak. But you're right, there are words now, culturally, there are words now that are unacceptable to us that you just wouldn't think of using, that you would have grown up using. And it comes to education of people saying, these words carry weight. They might not carry weight for you, but they carry weight for other people. And this is why they carry weight. So if you know that, you're not going to continue to keep using it. But it requires an element of humility, and cultural changes are slow. It's not, if you go, but it's effective. It doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen.
Yeah, well, I think an acceptance that you're wrong is the first move towards it.
You've got to say it, and then, there's this thing, like if I look back in, I'm 70 now, so I can look back in the 70s with some clarity, and what was going on there. There was, even in television, in mainstream television,
yes,
what was going on there was I mean, you look back, there's now programmes, a whole tranche of programmes that they couldn't possibly put on television now, and it was all accepted. It was 10, 15 million people looking at it.
Yeah.
So it is a progression, but it's a progression made through education. It's somebody saying, hold on a minute, that's wrong, and you saying, well, why is it wrong? And they explain, goodness gracious, you're right.
Yeah, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole with this one, or to put it more politely, a cesspit on sectarianism, which still exists and is still accepted in some quarters as if you just have to accept it. And if anything, laws that have been put in place, Alison says it's a slow process, a change in people's attitudes. It might be a slow process, but in our area of the country, there's an undercurrent, a hidden bigotry that still exists, and the people who can't go through the acceptance or learning curve think they're being persecuted.
I know, but this is that again is that'll have to be changed by, you know, several forces. One of the forces, good force, a beneficent force, would be education, but it is underpinned by the powers now. The people, you know, these are criminal hate crimes now, you know, and prosecution. I think if you talk to me about what I was, you know, what life was like for me as a teenager and what life was like at work, even in my early 20s, and I think things have improved quite dramatically.
Enough?
No. I mean, but I don't think there'll ever be enough, because the thing about it is to strive to make it better. But I think there'll always be an element. I think a lot of it is driven by fear. I think everything is driven, a lot of stuff in life is driven by fear. And I think people who are expounding really racist or sectarian views, in their hearts are really afraid.
It doesn't help though when you have heads of state, you have lots of people in high positions of authority who get away with demonising individuals. I mean, Rico felt isolated, questioning whether he should have even raised his head above the parapet to highlight what he had to go through. So, you know, there is a fear. There is
Absolutely.
a fear when you're demonised, and now I think there's an acceleration of that and a reintroduction of that.
Well, the political dynamic means that that most analysts would say that to win a majority in Westminster, if you've got to at least court that race card, at least play that race card. You can see it in the Labour Party. You can see the way Keir Starmer's moved to, you know, strangers in our own land, that kind of rhetoric, which is a complete anathema to my view of any socialist principles at all. So there's that dangerous dynamic where people are trying to satisfy it rather than reject it, or trying to deal with the devil, I think.
Well, it's an interesting one, and I think you could spend a long, long time on it. You could have, you know, politicians, you could have individuals who've suffered like Rico at the hands of it. You could dedicate hours and hours of programming to it. Whether you would get anywhere with some people, I don't know, but it's certainly worth a watch. It's a one-to-one. You can get it on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel with Rico Quitongo and the battle he had and what he suffered at the hands of a racist comment made towards him when he was just playing a game of football, the football that he loves. Well worth watching. So that's the unsavoury aspect that rears its ugly head in football. One of the things which is an intriguing thing in football is the search for the Rangers manager, because quite simply, everybody and their granny wants to take a flyer as to who they think they're going to go for. Now, might say something slightly controversial here. Sean Dyche is not interested in the Rangers job, which is great news for the Rangers fans, I think, because I don't think Sean Dyche knows really anything about Scottish football. I don't think he's got the qualities that the Rangers fans demand. I'm not sure the football or the brand of football that he's been involved in would satisfy what the Rangers fans want. I might be wrong, maybe I'm taking a shot in the dark here. I'm just looking at historically the type of clubs he's managed and the type of job that he was faced with. Rangers is not that type of club.
Yeah, I think he might have been the antithesis to Russell Martin anyway. It's an irrelevance because the fact is he's not interested in the job, but I think it's an interesting one. I think it has to be a popular appointment. I think it has to be an appointment that unifies the Rangers support. I think it's very difficult for a manager in any circumstances to come in and be swimming against the current immediately, as Russell Martin was, and you've got no credit in the bank. I think you have to then, in those circumstances, hit the ground running. You need an immediate response. I think Steven Gerrard is a name that just is recurring. It's been circulating way before Russell Martin was dismissed on Sunday evening. I think there's a romanticism about Steven Gerrard in the minds of the Rangers support because of the trophy that he did win. He stopped the 10, he delivered this singular title. I think if you actually were to look at the stats and look at it with a clear head in broad daylight, I'm not sure he is the answer. I don't think his record was all that great when you hold it up, and we've spoken about this often. I was working at the game at Tynecastle when I'm fairly sure Steven Gerrard was very, very close to saying, that's it, I've had enough. And then when you actually look at the title that was won, it came in a really odd season. It came in that COVID season when everything was so out of the ordinary. Celtic imploded. You were playing games in stadiums that had no supporters. I actually think that worked for Rangers at that point. So for me, I don't know that Steven Gerrard is the answer, but I can see his selling points to the Rangers support, and I think it would be a very popular appointment.
Yeah, it's a strange love affair with him. I don't get it, and I have gone on record on several programmes about this fixation they have with Steven Gerrard. But on the flip side of it, I'm certainly not going to take away, and I think, again, I try regularly on this programme with all of us. I think we all try and offer a balance to it. And the fact is, he still had to win the games. He still had to get something out of the team, and he still had to bounce back from that point in his life where he maybe thought, I can't, I'm 2 years into this and I can't get a trick out of this team, or maybe the opposition are just too good. But he persevered, and he persevered to the point of turning draws, which were killing them, into wins, 1-0 wins, keeping clean sheets, beating Celtic in games. That was the key to it all. And he managed to do that, Hugh. And interestingly enough, listening to him on his podcast with Rio Ferdinand, I think the key element of it, which is everybody grows and they learn and they become better. Frank Lampard's a classic case. We'll talk about him shortly. But Steven Gerrard mentioned that taking a job, he's eager to get back in, but he'll only get back in when he's got all the components in place, which is, first of all, a club that says, look, we're going to bag you. Everything in the structure seems to be suiting him. And then he's looking and saying, but I've got to have the right people around me. Because I thought it was a good insight into him and his maturity that he said, there are things that I'm not good at, and I need other people, specialised people that can help me, that can do things that I can't do.
Yeah, I think I think every coach should listen to that, because there's things that they aren't good at, and most good coaches are good delegators. They get people to do this, that, and the next thing. I think the Rangers' problem is a strategy problem, and they came up with a really good strategy. They said, right, we're going to appoint young coaches or good coaches, solid coaches, and we're going to give them time. We're not going to be swayed by matters on the pitch. We're going to stick to it, and we're not, that's it. This is going to be a painful process, and we're going to endure the pain. And they endure a certain amount of pain, and then suddenly say, we can't endure the pain anymore. I mean, Clermont loses to Queen's Park at home in the Scottish Cup. Everybody says, that's it. Patrick Stewart said, no, it's not that. We're going to endure this pain. And then suddenly they realise they can't. And the thing about it is, as well, is the circle gets shorter, because like Sabile's given a bit of a long time, Clement's given a bit of a long time.
Carrying the weight of previous failures.
And then suddenly it comes down to this guy gets, 120 days, 123 days. He just happened to buy. Now, good, bad, or indifferent, and I think it's bad. I mean, the thing I thought about Russell Martin was I couldn't see what he was trying to do.
Yeah.
So I thought it was bad. So I'm not coming out here and saying, but the thing about it is it means your strategy is up in the air. You're saying to yourself, well, we can't endure this pain.
Yeah.
We can't endure this because the fans are just, they're going crazy out there.
The criticism, though, Hugh, is quite simply from the previous board, which I think was too heavily influenced by Rangers fans on the board. Not that that's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to have fans on the board who are professionals who offer something to a board. But they made errors. I look at the appointments. Beale, how he sold that board, the fact that he was the light, the way, and the truth escapes me. But when he came in, there was a period eventually, as you say, they reach a point where they start to waffle. They start to see things that nobody else sees, and then the Rangers fans eventually think, no, we've had enough of you. And then the next part, in comes Clement, and again he reaches that point where he can't get a trick out of them. He starts standing up at press conferences and kicking his legs. People are going, no, stop, you've lost the plot. And again, Russell Martin again. And they do things, away to Loch Lomond. He's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't.
See, the Loch Lomond thing, it's such a misnomer.
I know, but see when you're...
Celtic had a magician in that week as a team building exercise. See if you're winning games, do whatever you like.
Absolutely.
You could go up and do the... Clement could go up and do the hokey-cokey if he's winning games.
Absolutely.
There's no case.
No, but they use it to beat you over the head.
Exactly.
It's about perception.
It's the perception. See
if he was winning, see that, like going up Connacht Kelly going for a dip, it would be seen as innovative. It would be seen as...
eccentric, quirky. What a laugh.
Giving the boys a real chance to break.
Isn't this new? This is a whole modern...
But the ultimate thing for me, and the only thing I look at, and I always mention it to everybody who's ever worked for PLZ, don't let your eyes deceive you. No. Go and watch the team. And why are you laughing?
You see it every show.
Honestly, I do see it every show because because sometimes, and I'm not talking about young journalists or anything like that, or older journalists, experienced journalists, some people who are biased journalists, they get on a theme, Hugh, and they embrace it without thinking, well, wait a minute, I'm watching them, they're rubbish.
No.
There's no style.
Well, that's
the thing you've got to do. That's what you're paid to be as a journalist. Balanced, not to be swayed by any outside forces who are influencing you, or you're trying to court favour with someone. That is not your job. Your job is to look, to report, to analyse, in some cases in punditry, to say, listen, what you're seeing and the reality are two different things. Is that not the job of a journalist?
Absolutely, and I think, again, is to be open to, one of the things that I've become more open to as well is trying to back my judgment, my eyes, with stats. And I know this is, you'll get old-timers shouting, oh, XGs and all that, but I find it interesting that the stats, I don't use the stats as, as a be-all and end-all, but I do use the stats as to say, right, okay, what are they doing with this possession and what are they creating out of this possession? And if you look at the Rangers stats, back what you see with your eyes, they back a team that...
can't defend.
Well, can't defend, but I think the damning thing about the Falkirk game for me, and I went back and looked at it again, was that after Rangers lost an equaliser, historically, if Rangers or Celtic lose an equaliser 12, 14 minutes to go, it's the Alamo after that. You're peppering shots, Scott Bean's going to have a worldie. You might have to have a bit of luck with things like that. And I don't think they had a shot and goal in that 14 minutes, and you see yourself, that's not going to wash, I'm afraid.
It also points to a fragility within the squad, a mental fragility.
This is another big problem for them.
The biggest problem Rangers had, and I've spoken to chairman, interim chairman, new chairman, is the recruitment has been abysmal. The strategy that they put in place over the last, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it is you want to look at, and you can go back and be highly critical of it. But if you go back to 2000, when Dick Advocat had spent an absolute fortune on his side, when you look back at that period and then you start to see the strategy going forward, there are a couple of managers that I think deserve tremendous credit, because as the budgets were getting cut, they were still able to notice a good player. And I give Walter Smith stands alone. He knew his stuff. Alex McLeish deserves tremendous credit, because they were able to win by bringing in players they knew could do a job in that structure. But after that period, you know, the signing policy from when they came out of, you know, the whole madness of liquidation to, you know, a club in the lower leagues, from then on, it's been catastrophic. Countless people who have come into that job have just suggested players on ridiculous wages, but on this premise of we are Rangers and we've got to get back to where we believe we should be. And it's been mistake after mistake. And somewhere along the line, somebody should have intervened and said, by the way, you're suggesting these players, not good enough, you're out. And I think this time around, there's got to be a sea change, where when they appoint the person, they've got to look behind at the structure that's supporting the person and say, listen, we've got to reanalyse the way we recruit players for the manager.
That's the big strategic problem, because they're sitting on a £20 million net spend this summer.
More than that.
That said, and it's not worked. I mean, I know it's early days yet, but there's already we can't be definitive about the Chermiti, the £8 million centre forward or anything like that. I mean, but we can. The indications that some of the buys are not quite what's needed in the SPFL. So you're going to have, if you have, for example, Gerrard coming in, that's a huge negotiation. Can you see Gerrard coming in and saying, do you know what, I'm going to be part of a transfer committee, I'm going to work under a sporting director, I'll work under him, I will take players from him? Or is he going to say, no, I want the last say in players and I want to do this, which you would think would not be the business model of the new owners. So strategically, they've got to get things right. We talked about in the summer that the first thing they had to get right was get the sporting director and then get a manager. But that hasn't worked. Now they're in a situation where, for just reasons that are imperatives now, they can't go down the route of a really bright young coach. They can't go and say, we're getting Matthias Svensson from Midtjylland, or, you know, from the such and such, because over the last 5 years he's shown that he's improved the club by certain metrics.
Yes.
Because they can't do that now.
No, because the Rangers
fans will just go, no.
Yeah, and the other thing about it though, Hugh, and I just wonder about this, and Alison and I discussed this earlier this week, I wonder if this next manager coming in, now, I would suggest to you, and I threw it in on Monday's programme, that people can go through a learning curve, they can make mistakes, lots of managers do, you make mistakes, and then you get to a situation where you learn, you grow, you become a better manager. Frank Lampard is the top of the championship. He's only lost one game, and people are looking at him and thinking, now he looks as if he's worth a shout. Unlikely they're going to get him out of there. And then you've got a situation where...
Well, he turned him down before. You know.
Absolutely. And then you've got a situation where the popular choice might be Gerrard, but you've got to have somebody that's... I think you've got to have somebody that's won something, that's got a bit of credibility, that's got a bit of expertise to be able to handle the madness of this. Is it a free hit this season, Hugh?
It's never a free hit.
Is it a free hit because people will think the league's gone?
Aye, but everybody says it's a free hit until it reaches reality.
Yeah.
It's a free hit till you get, till you see you lose the League Cup semi-final, then it ramps up again because the Scottish Cup's the only thing.
You're also in danger of not getting second.
And then they go to Paisley, say, in the Scottish Cup, and they lose to St Mirren. I think, a lot of stuff sounds really good in theory. If you sit down, as 49's Marath or Patrick Stewart all sitting saying, right, this season, basically, I don't think we'll win the league, let's try and get second, qualifiers, maybe get a cup and all that. But it's basically a kind of free hit this way, we've did this, wait to January, get somebody, wait till things settle down. You go, but things don't settle down. And it's not just a Rangers problem, it's a Celtic problem as well. Things don't settle down. You know, Celtic, it was really interested in Sunday when you're watching the scores coming in. 1 point Celtic are 2-1 down to Motherwell. You're going, that's a team won the double last year, got to the knockout phases of the Champions League. So won, what was it, 39 out of 42 domestic trophies. And you said, this will be toxic over the road. You know, I was sitting at the basketball, I was saying, this will be down the road, this will be toxic. It's almost unique. You know, most football works on certain rules, you know. But Glasgow is almost unique because if you're doing badly, the pressure on you, and you can talk to really good guys. You can talk to Gordon Strachan about it, Martin and Neil about it. I mean, real football people, and they say nobody understands what it's like. Nobody quite gets what it's like here.
See, the other problem for Rangers this season too is a perception that Celtic are there for the taking this season, and that compounds the frustration that they were unable to take advantage of that, because this isn't Celtic of last season or the season before, where they're consistent, they're fluent, they're battering teams, they look as though it's a straightforward procession towards the title. This is a Celtic team that are in chaos behind the scenes as well, and like that, the toxic element, the civil war that's going all the way through that club just now is undoubtedly having an effect on the part too. So if you're a Rangers fan, you're sitting and saying, we've just lost a glorious chance this season to go and add to that pressure, to ask the question.
Doesn't help when you've got Hearts actually with a manager that almost took the job, but the circumstances flagged up something in his mind that he thought, this is not the time to go to Rangers. But Derek McInnes, I mean, Hearts are absolutely adamant that they will resist all approaches if they were to go to Derek McInnes. I don't think they will look towards Derek McInnes. I don't know how you feel about that.
I don't know. I don't know enough about Derek. You'll know better, knowing him much better than me. But I don't know if they will. I think in terms of strategy, in terms of appeasing the fans, and instead of putting a lid in a bit, that Gerrard is very much would be very much the preferred option.
Yeah.
I think the obstacles to that will be in Gerrard's side, because he'll want to get certain I don't know, your commitments in place, assurances.
Yeah.
We've spent all this money. He might be saying, in January I need money.
another bunt in January. I need full control. Things that go against the model that they're probably going for, particularly from the background that they come from, which they're trying to take into Scottish football, which is common to all football, where the front office, what they call the front office, really decides, and the coaches execute. And the front office decides strategy, recruitment, who they want, etc., etc. That would seem to be at odds with a Gerrard approach. So they're between the devil and the deep blue sea at the moment, because whatever happens is going to cost them money, and whatever happens is going to be a risk. But that's football.
Yeah, absolutely. Give us your thoughts on it as well. You can actually download the app, and in the contact section you can post a message to us, or if you fancy, you can actually record a message giving us your thoughts on who the next Rangers manager should be. We'll feature it on the programme as well, and we'll also make sure you get a little special something sent out to you if you want to comment. Interestingly enough, I was listening to Gerrard, and I was listening to Michael Owen a few weeks ago as well, and you see Paul Scholes in the media too. Lots of those, what they call the golden generation of players. Interestingly enough, I put together a top 10. I wonder where Gerrard features in the top 10 midfielders for England of all time. I thought I'd ram it into the programme before we talk about another unsavoury topic. The list here, Hugh, and this is where we always, Alison and I, bow to that extra 20 years that you have on us. Bobby Charlton, out on his own, best midfielder England ever.
Yeah, different game in those days because Charlton could play in a front three as well. But yeah, I'd put him very highly. I would put Gascoigne very high.
Yeah,
because Gascoigne was just a talent, mercurial, extraordinary talent.
they had Charlton 1, Gascoigne 2, Gerrard 3, Lampard 4, Brian Robson 5, David Beckham 6, Glenn Hoddle 7, Paul Scholes 8, Martin Peters 9, and Trevor Brooking. I wonder if there's people that we and lots of people of a generation would think, oh, you've missed him, you know. I mean, it's very difficult to put Duncan Edwards, you know, and people like that in.
You don't know about them. I mean, in my first sight, I'd put Scholes much higher than where he is. Of the modern generation, or the semi-modern generation,
Yeah.
I'd put Scholes third, you know.
Would you?
Oh, aye.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd
I
put him
like
before.
Scholes as well.
I'd put him in front of Lampard and Gerrard.
Front of Lampard.
Aye, and Gerrard.
Wow.
Quite a distance.
Yeah, I actually was in your camp, Hugh, at times with Scholes, but I just look at his ability, Lampard, to score regularly. I mean, a midfielder who gets so many goals, and
But it's one of these ones.
Bobby Tamblin's record at Chelsea. It's phenomenal, you know.
But it's one of these ones that you can't really argue with. See, like if somebody said to me, like you said to me, but Lampard's better than Scholes, I would say I disagree, but I couldn't shite you down.
Yeah, who's better of the three of them?
I think Scholes is, by quite a distance is better than the other two. But that's just my opinion. If somebody said to me, I mean, it's not ludicrous to say, oh no, you're wrong, Gerrard's better than number, because we're all. What I like about Scholes was I think Scholes' game intelligence was better than Gerrard's and Lampard's. I think I thought he was a more intelligent player than he could keep Manchester United going. What I take on board is the way Alec Ferguson always talked about him. What I take on board is the way, like the people like Rooney and Ronaldo talk about him. But I would, I mean, if there's some metric come out in the future that decided, no, you're wrong, it's Frank Lampard, I'd say, fair enough, you know. I mean, you're not dealing with, you're not saying, you're not dealing with just poor players in comparison. You're talking about really top class players.
There was a really interesting conversation actually around all this when Gerrard was saying how he looks at it now and how friendly some of these players are with one another, particularly across the Liverpool and Man United side of it, whereas when they were all playing for England, the relationship just wasn't there because obviously they were huge.
I thought that was a really good part of the interview, what they called them, because I bristle when I hear this, the golden generation. I'll say, well, what did they win?
Yeah, exactly.
What gold did they have?
Yeah,
this
they always failed.
that was unfulfilled.
Always failed.
Yeah, I think the best England side out with 1966 that I've ever seen that was so unlucky was Sir Bobby Robson's side. It had everything.
Yeah.
It had quick defenders, it had hard defenders, it had a world-class midfielder.
And a world-class centre-forward.
Yeah, a world-class centre-forward. And it also had, dare I say it, one of my favourite players that he's easily in my top favourite 50. Just to throw Alison off, is Chris Waddle.
I knew I was going to
Chris Waddle was a genius.
And they also had a very good midfielder in David Platt that we could,
I wasn't a huge fan of Platt.
And I liked him. I thought he was really important to the team. And he could score goals as well in important times. Yeah, that was a failure of a team. I mean, well, Bobby Robson's a bit unlucky, but the golden generation was just failures.
Yeah, absolutely.
In international football.
Yeah.
And it was because, I mean, a lot of it, Gerrard was scaring them, but they all just sat in the rooms when they talked to each other. And you have to have a team spirit. And I think it's interesting that Tuchel has said to Bellingham, you're not coming. And Bellingham said, I know I'm not quite fit, but I'm wanting to come on the squad. He said no. And that suggests to me that Bellingham has to change his attitude.
Yeah, okay. So some of those England teams are failures. You heard it here first, Hugh, sticking by it.
They're all, not some of them, they're all. Come on.
They're all
failures.
Sorry to our English friends who listen to the programme and watch it as well, but Hugh's eyes are not deceiving him.
Well, I'll look at it, every time an England team, they go to a tournament and you'll look at the team and you say, my goodness, that's a good, strong, not 11, 22, and every tournament they come up short. And you say to yourself, well, there's something wrong there.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're 1-0 up at Wembley, home ground, in front of all your fans, and you don't win, I think that's a failure.
Yeah. We're going to finish on the Celtic supporters story. Obviously, the request from a number of supporters groups that they wanted to speak with the board and get into some sort of communication to express to them their disappointment in certain aspects of the way the club is run. And when, eventually, over a period of time, the board accepted what they were saying and obviously said to them, we'll meet you. The word coming out from the supporters associations is a recurring theme through all answers and discussions was a lack of humility, awareness and accountability. And the collective of supporters were disappointed that the club remained unwilling to engage meaningfully on questions of leadership, governance and accountability. But they're obviously going to continue to try and get some kind of communication, push for change, and they're obviously going to go through a number of steps to try and enforce that change. Whether they're going to be successful or not is open to debate. As far as the club itself, they are committed to ongoing dialogue. They said, we acknowledge that the club is not where we want to be at the moment, that we have not achieved all of our objectives in the summer transfer window and the Champions League, and that mistakes have been made from which we will learn. We recognise the concerns raised, share the frustrations of our supporters, and valued the opportunity to hear from the supporters. Our immediate objective is to seek to make progress without negatively impacting on the team on the field of play, and that we continue to focus on delivering success this season. So there you have the two conflicting press releases and feelings. The supporters certainly don't feel as if they were willing to accept that we're getting things wrong and there was a need for change. Hugh and I discussed it just before we were coming on, Alison. There has to be a balance where you look at all the good things that the Celtic board do. There's a lot of things that they do really, really well. But is there a willingness to accept that, wait a minute, you've got things wrong. There are things that are wrong, and there maybe are certain individuals that are not right.
It feels as though the die is cast, doesn't it? It feels as though you're at a standoff and there is no resolution to be found here. I think the meeting was almost doomed to failure before even you had heard a thing about it, because minds are already made up that it's not working and that they want change. That change is unrealistic. I don't see that there is going to be the kind of movement on the board that Celtic fans want. I don't know how it comes about. So I think there is a frustration about that because it's based in an impotence. Essentially, they can shout and say, this is what we're unhappy about, and there is a lot of legitimacy in that, particularly this season, about what they are unhappy about. However, I think what is inarguable this season is that it's had an effect on the whole club. You can sense it on the pitch. I think it looks incredibly disjointed. I think you have some players who look very inhibited on the ball, or lack of confidence. You feel it at games. You feel the tension in games when it's not going particularly well. Where it goes from here, I don't know. I thought one of the really interesting things that came out of it when I was reading through it last night, I think, was the story that went to the Sun. You know, someone clearly within the club briefed the Sun on the manager, and they closed it down entirely. It was just like, we're not going to discuss this, and we're putting a full stop next to it. I almost think it's pointless going along to the meeting if you're unprepared to talk about these kind of issues that have caused significant consternation, and that is one of them. I think when you have a situation like that, where someone within the club has briefed a tabloid newspaper against the manager, it's a huge talking point. I think you are going to be asked about it. I think the very least is you come up with some kind of explanation for how that came about, or how that story came about. I think it doesn't do anyone any favours just to say there's no discussion here, and I think that buys into the mistrust that seems just like a cycle.
Yeah, it's an addition. it's an unwelcome addition to the overall problem. It's a sideshow that developed that wasn't really necessary.
But it also seems as though it epitomises the toxic element around everything within the club.
Yeah, I
and the civil war that you have behind the scenes.
I don't know if it's the attitude of a billionaire who is not going to be told. There is, and I don't know if you buy into the fact that attitudes and the way people go about their business is generally coming from the top, and then it works its way down to everybody who has to operate within that system. And there is a certain arrogance and disdain at times that the board has for anybody who gets in their way. And I wonder if maybe there needs to be a modicum of humility to say, yes, we get so many things right, but we accept that there maybe needs to be change in certain aspects.
Yeah, I think that was another interesting thing for me when when the collective statement came out, and then the Celtic statement came out. I thought the Celtic statement was really conciliatory, and if you looked at the two statements,
we apologised for the fact
they were apologising. If you looked at the statement, said we're calling for humility. If you just look at the two statements, you would say, what one is the more humble here? I would contest it was the Celtic one.
Yeah, but you apologising and then just keep going down the same road to you is a different kettle of fish.
Absolutely, but there was a humility there to say, listen, we've got it wrong. We're going to work on it. We're going to learn lessons from it, and we're going to get. I don't think you were going to get any more than that. Whether that's enough to satisfy people, we know it's not. The most important thing in this, I think, when we're just talking about statements and this guy said this and this guy says this, if I'm sitting there at Celtic Park as a director, or if I'm sitting there as part of the fan collective, it's the same story. How does this move forward? How does this get resolved? And I'm like Alison, I find it very difficult to see how it resolves. It looks as if the Celtic collective went ahead and stick. The opening of their remarks was, they said, we walked into the meeting and we said that Chris Mackay and Michael Nicholson's positions were untenable. But we'll discuss that later. So that's your opening salvo, is to say to the two major guys that are sitting in front of you, we want you sacked, you're out.
Yeah.
Now, you say to yourself, well, as a priority or as an aim, I mean, these guys could resign at the end of the season. These guys could say, I've had enough of them. But they're not going to go out. They're not going to, there's no impetus from the fans that are going to make them, there's no voting procedure, there's nothing. Yeah. So how did the fans collect, and very legitimate concerns about a lot of stuff. I think a lot of stuff's legitimate. I think the football department at Celtic has been dysfunctional for a long time. I think the transfer window was just a symptom of that.
Yeah.
And I think the fans are right to say, we want a say in this. But how is that formed? How do you package that from both sides?
I think the only realistic change that you can have is to present ideas almost, is to say the board's not going to change, but the one thing that you can change is the recruitment strategy of the club and how that is structured, how that, at the minute, it's amateurish. There is no getting away, and it's become shambolic. They've deviated from their own philosophies. They've lost their way with a strategy that was actually incredibly successful for a long time, and that strategy moved and morphed. And I think you need to go back to having a more modern recruitment process within the club that doesn't exist at the minute. And that is the kind of change that can come about and that you can implement fairly easily without massive structural changes to the board, because that it's not going to happen. Yeah. There's no mechanism to make it happen.
I don't agree with you that the transfer policy has been a failure. If you're a business person and you look at Celtic as a board and you say, okay, it may be chaotic, but it hasn't been a failure.
I didn't say it was a failure. I said there was a movement from the strategy that was in place.
Yeah, but that movement, whether it's a change of the person who offers the players or a recruitment guy like Mark Lawwell or somebody else who's come in, the blueprint hasn't changed. They're still shifting players out for a profit. They're still able to put it in that you can't.
It's a failure when you've got a striker leaving at the end of the January window and you don't have a striker to replace him.
I accept.
That's a failure.
I accept that. That's a fan's perspective on it. That's a manager who looks and says, "You've derailed my chances of maybe getting a big result in Munich." That's a manager who looks at his team and is trying to do the best, and he feels as if he's been let down, and he's highlighted it regularly. It's also a fan's perspective of saying, "Come on, this is what we wanted." This is not the perspective of a business group, a board. They don't look at it and say, "Kyogo needed to be replaced. We should have replaced him." They look at it and say, "Kyogo's moved on. We've got that money for him. He's made a profit. Ida, 9 million. Let's offload him, and we'll get these other 2 or 3 players that we bought by mistake and offload them." And what happens is the board sits round the table and says, "We get 7 million there. We lost a couple of million there. We sold him on for 3 million, but we actually bought him for 1." They just look at it as an accountant's team who said, "This is good. We're on 77 million in the bank. We haven't spent the way some people want us to. And strategically, figuratively speaking, this is a successful plan." And when you get a group of fans and a manager who are having a right go at the moment, that whole team, the chairman, in control from the majority shareholder to the chief executive and to the rest of the board, are saying, this plan's working. This strategy is working. And the only thing that I think is suspect on the whole thing from their point of view is they are now all digging in and saying, "We're not going to be told by anybody out with this that we're going to deviate from this. This strategy is working." It came out in their press release. This strategy works and it's successful, and here are the figures to back it up. This is a club that is successfully run this way. And they're not going to deviate from it. And every now and then, Hugh, they infuriate the fans by saying, "And by the way, here's a smokescreen. UEFA, we can't, in our financial fair play, we can't do this. This didn't work out, but we gave you this." They're coming up with things that block it off constantly. There's an arrogance about the board, but you also have to balance it and say, if you're looking at it from an accountant's point of view and how a club's run, they look at it and say, "We're successful. We're not going to do what you say."
I think, yeah, there's a lot of truth in that, but I think that they feel they weren't successful. I think they feel deeply frustrated internally, not only about this transfer window, but why they feel you're not to replace Kyogo. I think there's people saying to themselves, I don't think there was a strategy to sell Kyogo and not replace him. We go back to that press conference at Motherwell when they looked as if they were getting one over the line and didn't.
Hugh, I've seen they looked as if and they got one over the line and didn't for the last 10, 15 years.
But that's what happens. Every club in the world does that. Every club in the world has players that didn't go over the line.
With great regularity in a January and a summer window with them. Yeah. They've been consistently guilty of that. That's why the Celtic fans are at this point.
That's where the failure of recruitment is.
But you've got to look at it as in a wider perspective. I see why fans are upset about this. That summer transfer window was a shambles, an absolute shambles. Yeah. And there was reasons behind it. We can go back to the chain that starts with young boy Delap pulling his hamstring, and the chain means that the Celtic don't get. Yeah, we look at this and we look at that, but scrambling about after the transfer window really closes for an out-of-contract player who actually looks as if he'll be all right, actually. But anyway, it was a shambles. And I actually think the board know that. I think the board know that.
When you're saying you're looking at it, you're saying, "Oh, it's been largely been a success." In the wider sense, yes, it's you look at a club. In a business sense, you would say they're probably the best run club in Britain when you look at the finances. However, you're not going to say that this isn't a board now who are sitting and reflecting on a failure to get into the Champions League and what that would have meant financially.
Yeah.
I think Almaty was rather than the transfer window, I think Almaty was when it all turned, because people said, "Wait a minute, we've got 4 hours against this team that you say believe your eyes." That everybody's sitting watching this team and says, "This team is gunk." I think they've lost 10 goals in 2 Champions League games. Yeah. This team is gunk. We played nearly 4 hours against this mob and couldn't score a goal. But if you ask me about what Celtic board's attitude about money and all that, see, they've got £70 million in the bank. I think if you talk to Michael Nicholson, Chris Mackay, or anybody else in the operating factor, said, by the way, you've only got £50 million in the bank because you spent 20 million on these players, but you've satisfied the fans. I think they would have looked at that as £20 million well spent.
Yeah, listen, it'll rumble on. How they resolve it, we do not know. We don't have the answers, but certainly there's going to be a few people continuing to force the case on behalf of the Celtic supporters, what action they can take, what changes will happen, we don't know. You can give us your thoughts on it as well. It's Scottish football, it's just a game that keeps on giving. There's something to talk about regularly, and we do that hopefully with a bit of balance for you on the Journos every week. Thank you to Hugh, to Alison. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel, and if you get a chance, if you want to win 2 tickets to the Champions League final with flights and accommodation, why not subscribe to PLZ Premium? You've got some really good interviews coming up on there. Politicians, entertainers, managers, past and present, legendary players. It's all there on PLZ Premium. Plus, of course, we're giving you competitions and prize giveaways as well. From everybody on the Journos, thank you for listening and watching.